Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. On a gray day, as I'm looking at, I always find when I'm doing these, I'm looking out at the sky. Sometimes for the first time, actually taking a look at what it's doing outside. I was going to start off with these. We've had 2 long weekends in a row, which can be nice, but they can make for brutal short weeks. And as we have a very tight schedule and a short session, that's kind of what's happening in Hartford. So I thought I'd talk a little bit, sort of a part 2. I did a little committee process last week, and I'm going to give you a little bit more this week at the risk of going too far into the weeds. So when you see committees schedule things, we generally have 3 kinds of things that we schedule. One are committee meetings, at which we vote. Then there are public hearings, which are what they say they are, as described. They're when the public gets to comment on specific legislation, which is sometimes quite specific and fully drafted, and sometimes just an idea. And then informational forums, which can happen at any time during the session, and they're less official things, but they are meant to educate the committee members and anyone who tunes into them on particular topics or on reports or hearing from agencies, various things like that. We have 2 of those coming up in the Finance Committee next week. And so generally what you will see, those could be at any time, but you'll see committee meetings in the early sector. That's in the early part of session. That's for us to establish what's on our agenda for the year. Then there are the public hearings, because every bill that we pass out of committee has to have a hearing. And then we have more committee meetings at the end, at which we take what we call sometimes final action, which means we decide whether we're going to endorse those bills and vote them out of committee. There's lots of things that happen in between those things, but those are the 3 basic stages. And we just hit one of those, or we are tomorrow hitting in finance, which has some of the latest deadlines. Every committee has their own set of deadlines, but finance and appropriations tend to come behind the other deadlines because we hear other people's bills on Friday. And so we're sort of at the end of one chapter and moving to the public hearing phase. And so I was looking at my calendar this week, which included more of those short 20-minute meetings, and sort of the ones on the early part of the week were people who, cram it and get their homework in at the last minute because we were just about to hit the deadline. And then I have a few tomorrow who are more the people who are, maybe they don't realize they're looking for an extension, because our committee deadline to sort of set the table for our agenda is tomorrow. But we had our last committee meeting to do that on Wednesday, because one of the rules, I think, good practice rules for committee chairs is never hold your final meeting on the day of your deadline, because you always want a plan B. So still having those meetings, and sometimes they're about, amending things, or often they're about bills that are in other committees that might end up before us. So I'm being a little simplistic about that, but some of those there are, as in life, there are people who get their stuff in early and people who get their stuff in at the last minute or after the deadline. And then I wanted to give you a little bit of sort of 101, if you were to look up an agenda on the, General Assembly website, what that means, particularly the agendas that you see for this time of year. And we just had our meeting this week. There we go. The first is concepts to be raised. And those are, single sentence, they are titles for bills. Often there's nothing in them yet. They're just a title. They are basically the things that the committee itself wants to take up this year. And sometimes there's a lot of policy already behind them. Maybe they're the result of a task force that's been at work. And sometimes they're brand new and don't have anything in them. And sometimes they are very general. Like our earlier meeting, we had some concepts that were titled An Act Concerning Finance. So that might not tell you much about what that means. And in our case, there isn't much to tell about that. So again, because the Finance Committee comes late in the game, we often reserve those titles, those generic titles, to use them if the deadline has passed and we need them for something. And sometimes that can be controversial in other committees. It's generally not in the Finance Committee because of the reasons I just explained. And so we pass some of those, raise some of those general titles that won't mean anything to anybody, including the committee members yet, because everybody, it's a bipartisan thing that we understand that we're going to need those. And in fact, we've already, some will be designated to use by various members of the committee on a bipartisan basis. So that gives you a little guideline of what that means if you are tempted to look at an agenda for this time of year. And then there are the second set of the agenda that I wanted to point out is what we call reserved for subject matter public hearing. Those listed on there are what are called proposed bills, which means that an individual legislator or a group of legislators has proposed those. And we have decided to take them up, and we will hold a hearing on them. And again, sometimes those are fully drafted, and sometimes they're just, even though they're a proposed bill, they're very general. And so sometimes the public hearings can be just general on those. The committee hasn't adopted those in any official sense yet, but we've agreed to give them a hearing, and we'll decide after we hear at the hearing what we will do with them. So that's basic Agenda 101. I wanted to note a few other things that have happened in the last week and in the upcoming week. I had Sharon Hospital had a briefing for area legislators, including Senator Harding, Representative Cook, and myself on the call, which we talked a lot about what's happening there. We discovered after the fact that Sharon Hospital that day had filed a petition for rehearing, which is their appeal, that their final appeal that they're entitled to take in front of the Office of Health Strategy of the final ruling, which OHS required that labor and delivery remain open. So they did file a petition for rehearing, and stay tuned. And I wanted, this day has already been a long day, but it started with a bang, which was I got to go to the FFA breakfast at Houstonic Valley Regional High School and read the FFA proclamation and have a delicious breakfast prepared by the FFA students, and it is always a pleasure to be with them. I want to note that a group of them came to Hartford last week, and I believe they're coming back to testify, and they are always fantastic. We have FFA students from across the state who are testifying in favor of education funding, and we very much endorse the fact that they are in there fighting for things that the legislature put into legislation last year, and we're fighting to keep in the budget. So I thank them for coming, and they're always impressive. I also got to do Warren Prindle, and our art teacher who's retiring this year, gave me a tour of his artwork, which is on display at the high school, which is beautiful and fun. And if you're in the area, I suggest going and taking a look. So next week, the sort of double scheduling begins in earnest, which is to say, actually it's not next week, it's tomorrow. I have an environment committee meeting, an energy and technology informational forum, and a press conference with the Reproductive Rights Caucus, all at exactly the same time. So not sure yet how I'm going to manage that. I may have to draw on the services of others to help me figure out how to do that. And then I wanted to note that this weekend the League of Women Voters is holding a legislative breakfast on Saturday at Camp Koch in Goshen. I'm looking forward to that. And also there's an event. I'm doing an event with the comptroller at the Washington Senior Center on Thursday, February 29th. At 1:30, and that is on Leap Day, and after that it's March, which is kind of shocking. So enjoy the rest of February, and I'll talk to you soon.